From BC Place at Expo 86, Misha and Dianne are watching week 97 of Santa Barbara. Doesn't have its original marshmallow look.
No.
That's right, it's week 97 of Misha and Dianne watch Santa Barbara.
Hello.
And where did we do our intro that week? I don't remember. One of the expo sites. This week's hat is one that I won from a radio station in Kelowna when I was a kid. My favorite radio station was CKIQ. Unfortunately, this one I won from CKOV. And worse yet, it was after they switched to the all-country format. So we really only had one good station in Kelowna. It is Monday, June 10th, 1986, and we have watched episode 470 of Santa Barbara. Last night on St. Elsewhere, we saw Rosalind Allen, who you wouldn't have recognized because she'll be playing Gretchen Richards in about 5 years. 4 years, maybe. Mason sees Mary having lunch with Sophia and guesses correctly that Mary is staying with Sophia. And Mary's worried Mason doesn't love her anymore because she's hiding the truth from him, and he confirms that he does still love her. David tells Julia that the lipstick she found is probably from the previous hotel guest. He says she's the only woman he's been with since Madeline. I don't know if I buy that.
Yeah, I find it, given the amount of money all these people are supposed to have, it would be a bit creepy to have some old lipstick in the hotel room that you were staying in. So
yeah, you would think they would have cleaned it. Now, he must have moved out of the Capwell Hotel, and so it wasn't clear, yesterday whether he'd found an apartment or not. But I guess he's in a different hotel. Maybe that one across the street that likes to report, fights in the Capwell Hotel. Then we see David returning the lipstick to Sheila. So it was hers the whole time. He tells her, just don't give anyone else a reason to connect us. One false step and that jury might believe I did murder Madeline. So at least to Sheila, he is pretending that he did not kill Madeline.
And we have to assume that his relationship with Sheila at least has enough intimacy that she's leaving her lipstick around his place.
Mm-hmm. So whatever their interaction with is, he doesn't seem to think it, would lead to murder. So we'll see. Mason and Julia get to spar over jury selection. They have some little scenes together where they dig at each other. The best one is after Julia rejects several jurors. Mason says, I called Mother Isabel at the convent. She's bringing 11 of her closest friends. We don't actually see the jury selection. We just see them in between back in the meeting room. So, back at potentially the other wing of the same building, Justin gets himself locked into a room with two other patients, Jimmy and Bobby. For $20, Jimmy shows how he can get out of the locked room, and Justin manages to sneak out and find Kelly's room, but is caught and dragged away and put in isolation for 24 hours. So Kelly at least knows he's there, but saw him dragged away.
Now, I can only assume that Nick is in on this with Justin because we were speculating last time that Justin wouldn't end up getting locked in the mental institution because Nick was with him and could vouch for him. Mm-hmm. So I'm assuming this is all part of the plan they've hatched. Mm-hmm. I'm just a little bit concerned that this is going to reach a point where we'll be getting some kind of a one flew over the cuckoo's nest scenario for Justin, and he'll end up getting electroshock treatment or lobotomy or something, which, he's a very nice character, so that it would be very unfortunate for that to happen to him.
Yeah, having him put away for 24 hours is interesting. I guess that, we can explain why he's still there, and then they can do some other stuff, I guess, with the characters, like from a writing standpoint, before they bring him back. But, I guess he hasn't encountered anyone that knows him from when he was a psychiatry student. But I guess him being Kelly is in the ward for the criminally insane. So maybe it makes sense that people who work there hadn't encountered him while he was doing his residency or whatever it was. But he wasn't necessarily locked in there because he just told the orderly, "Oh yeah, that's my room." And luckily there was a bed in there that was empty, and the orderly bought it. Kelly meets 3 other women in the group therapy: Rose, Dorothy, I guess it's the cast of the Golden Girls, and Alice, who does not speak. So we have lots of sets built for this mental institution. We're introducing lots of characters. So I think this is going to be a storyline, at least probably till the August sweeps, I think. I think we're going to have some adventures in the state hospital.
And watching this, I've been thinking about the kinds of things we're currently watching. Old episodes of Dark Shadows as well, and of course they take a lot of their storylines from classic literature like Dracula, and we've just finished, or we're just in the middle of a Jekyll and Hyde kind of storyline, and I feel like with Santa Barbara we're seeing some kind of classic storylines they've been exploring. Of course, we saw the big treasure hunt with the Amanda Lockridge and that kind of thing. It seems like we're getting into a classic sort of mental institution horror storyline.
Now, I seem to remember at the time thinking it was very well done, and I feel like many years later, Days of Our Lives tried to do the same thing with the Patch character, and it was terrible. So we'll see if my memory is correct that this was actually done quite well. Julia and Courtney argue about whether or not David is guilty. Julia says, well, she warns Courtney that nothing is more dangerous in a jury's eyes than knowing the family don't believe them. And Courtney says, from what Pearl tells me, you would rather implicate your own brother-in-law. So, our theory that maybe Courtney slept with David didn't seem to be counteracted a bit by when Julia was actually pressing her about why are you so against David? And, she kind of had a slightly reasonable explanation. So maybe we were wrong about that. But maybe they're just hiding. Maybe the actors don't know yet, and they were playing it that way and ended up tricking us as a result. Lionel confronts Pearl in his real apartment. He wonders if Michael Baldwin Bradford III is the son of Ambassador Wynne Bradford, whom he went to prep school with, and grandson of Wynne Sr., former presidential candidate. And right away we get like a good vibe between Pearl and Lionel here.
Yeah.
Two kind of roguish but highborn people with a penchant for hijinks. So Lionel says, I haven't even started on the Baldwin side of the family yet. Anyway, after some back and forth, they agree to keep each other's secrets. Lionel then confronts Julia about sending Pearl to steal his date book and search his boat. And Julia tells him that she doesn't really think he killed Madeline. And he tells Julia that he was not having an affair with Madeline. He says it's all business, and it's all very secretive, but all I can tell you is it's got something to do with Madeline's father, Grant Capwell.
And that's a theory that you were floating a little bit earlier.
So I think if we ever meet Grant, maybe he does not get along well with Cece and would happily help the Lionel Lockridge, his arch enemy, perhaps damage the Capwell family or the Capwell brand in some way on the West Coast at least.
I think this is where we're starting to see how certain actions ripple out and affect other things. So Cece took away Lionel's home, and that of course damaged his relationship with just about everyone around him. But it probably put a bee in Lionel's bonnet to get revenge as well, and maybe has nurtured this relationship between him and Cece's brother, who, as we suspect, do not seem to get along.
One wonders about those shares that Lionel had hidden in the Lockridge house. Maybe they were shares of Capwell East Coast, and he had some, leverage on Grant, saying, I'm a shareholder in XYZ of your companies, and there's some voting. Maybe you want me on your side, but, something like that, maybe.
Yeah, maybe.
Pearl gives Julia the letter from Madeline to Lionel, and Julia says she owes David the best defense she can. And Pearl reminds her that this will hurt her relationship with her family, and he specifically brings up Augusta. So I think we're headed down that path. I don't think there's any stopping that train.
And one of the things Julia says, in fact, I think she says it more than once, is that David's defense comes first, before everything else. And this seems to, it's very good for a lawyer to really dedicate themselves to a case, but this seems to go a little bit beyond it, and you just get this sense that perhaps Julia is really digging her own grave with this.
Courtney tells Pearl she thinks Julia will paint Madeline as a nymphomaniac. Don't know where that came from, but Pearl says if David is guilty, the last thing he wants is for him to go scot-free. Courtney was a little annoyed at Pearl still for helping Julia. Lionel arrives, surprised to see Pearl at the Capwell house, and Pearl says he sometimes moonlights as a butler, like 7 days a week.
Now, it occurs to me, if this alliance between Lionel and Pearl holds, maybe Lionel can use Pearl's insider position to, further his own interests.
Like getting some of his possessions back. I was actually surprised he had the yacht, because that was one of the first things Cece wanted. I don't know, maybe he parked it out in international waters and Cece couldn't get it or something. Or it's, owned by a trust. Something like that really Lionel was not able to sign over. Cece is still angry at Sophia from having seen her with Lionel earlier at the Orient Express, and Lionel snaps and reveals to Cece that Sophia has been undergoing cancer treatment. Now, Sophia had begged him not to say anything when they saw Cece at the Orient Express, and Cece was clearly annoyed. They were hanging out together. So Lionel had almost started saying something earlier, but Sophia had stopped him. And that brings us to an end of a Monday episode, and we had the full credits again. We still have a few people in the credits that we won't be seeing anymore. Dylan Hartley, Paige Mosley is still listed, and Kirk Cranston, Robert Newman. Presumably this is because they have 3-month contracts, and even if they're not appearing, they have to stay in the credits for those 3 months. And I guess we could probably calculate, based on when they started, when their names will disappear from the credits. And we have 2 new people. We have Justin Dees as Keith Timmons, and when I said to you, we have a new cast member, you were like, what? It is, in fact, Alice, the silent one, in Kelly's room. So a very low-key introduction for a regular character. Mary Alice Ricasner is playing Alice. And this is our second black cast member after Sam. And our first member of a new family, the first black family we will be seeing as the months unfold. So,
wouldn't this be our third black cast member? Didn't Kelly's friend?
She wasn't in the credits. She was just
she was a day player.
She was just a day player. Yeah. So it'll be interesting to see if Alice will ever speak, and I assume we will see her family members visiting her as time goes on in what I'm gonna call it a 3-month storyline in the mental hospital. Presumably Kelly will be able to make her chatty, maybe with Justin's help. In the day player section, we have Dr. Rawlings again, Ben Piazza. He was actually in this episode, but I kind of glossed over his things a bit. Nurse, Tony Sawyer, same one we've had for the last mental institution episodes. Dorothy, Ellen Gear. Is that Ellen Gear? Who? Oh, I was thinking Will Gear. Never mind. I thought it was Grandma Walton for a second. Orderly, Alan David Gelman. Jimmy, that's one of the 2 roommates that Justin has. Martin Gray. And once again, Sheila Carlisle, played by Terry Trees. And that is it we are now in June, so we finished May. We will be back after we watch episode 471 of Santa Barbara. See you then.
Bye-bye.
Hey, do you think you could see yourself clear to letting us pick a jury by nightfall? I called Mother Isabel at the convent. She's bringing 11 of her closest friends.
Welcome back.
Hello.
We finished episode 471 of Santa Barbara, which originally aired Tuesday, June 3rd, 1986. Lionel swears Cece to secrecy about Sophia. Cece tells Eden, but swears her to secrecy. Eden visits Sophia and asks her to lunch. Cece tells Lionel and Augusta that he could fly in a specialist, and Lionel could pretend that he paid for it. Lionel doesn't have any money. I don't think they mentioned that during this. But,
yeah, I thought that was a big part of his problem.
Mm-hmm. Lionel says what Sophia needs can't be bought. Cece begrudgingly seems to accept that. Cece sends Sophia flowers to the table where she's having lunch with Eden, and shows up and apologizes for what he said earlier about her not being there for Kelly. Eden makes up a fake excuse to leave them alone, and he tells Sophia she can see her family whenever she wants. So Sophia, I don't think Sophia's caught on that anyone's told him. He's not super subtle, but he's has this definite 180. And then as their lunch, I guess, goes on, he mentions that Ted has a crush on Haley and that she gave her notice today. So that's a surprise. Sophia says he should just leave Ted and Haley alone. So he brings Sophia home and says she should come by for a swim sometime.
And this makes me wonder if maybe we'll see Haley waitressing at, Buzz's, perhaps. La Mesa's no longer a thing, and State Street Bistro has fallen by the wayside, so maybe we'll see her waitressing at Buzz's.
Buzz's or the Orient Express, I guess. Reminds me of when Ted and Christy were bussing tables at the Orient Express. But Ted has a different plan this summer, which we'll find out. I'm leaving it to the end because it's kind of the most fun. On the yacht, Lionel finds the table has been set and Augusta is cooking a meal for him. And Augusta says that Sophia's the one who set the flowers on the table. So it sounds like Augusta and Sophia had a little party before Lionel got there, preparing the table for him. So that's kind of fun. Lionel invites Augusta to join him for dinner and later asks her to spend the night. So they are de facto together, if not officially back together.
And Sophia and Augusta working together this way makes me think that if Julia drags Lionel into a court case and implicates him as a possible suspect in Madeline's murder, that we could potentially see an even stronger alliance between Sophia and Augusta.
I'm wondering, with these soap opera romances, usually something has to come between them. And it looks like Sophia's pretty, set on getting back with Cece. But perhaps this relationship between Lionel and Madeline will come out in court and Augusta will misinterpret it, as she always does. And that will make her pull back from Lionel.
Yeah.
And, or maybe my off-the-cuff idea that perhaps she knew, and we will find out that Augusta actually had dealings with Madeline as well.
Which will make things very stormy between Augusta and Julia. I mean, we're already, I think, setting ourselves up for quite a storm on that front. But I think that would make it even more so.
Mary tells Sophia she's going to tell Mason what Mark did. Sophia helps Mary get dressed up for her dinner with Mason. Mark seems surprised when Mary tells him to move out of the guest house. Sophia and Eden are happy to find Mason in a great mood as he waits for Mary. At one point, Eden, Sophia, and Cece at one table, Santana and Cruz at another table, Mason and Mary at another table in that center row. Mary takes off her wedding ring, and Mason presents her with an engagement ring and proposes right there at the Orient Express.
And I was actually so happy to see that, because in Mary's, in discussion with Mark, which was toxic as usual. Mark basically seemed to be trying to gaslight her into not revealing the rape to Mason. And I thought, oh my goodness, then this is going to be yet another drawn out thing between her and Mason. And instead, at the meal, she didn't tell Mason, but she kind of skipped over it by just taking off her wedding rings and said, no, we're not going to talk about that anymore. That's in the past.
I'm assuming Mason will find out at some point, possibly even if he chats with Sophia and says, "Oh well, Mary told me she was going to tell you what Mark did to her."
yeah. I'm sure it's not over. You know, you don't have something like that and it's over. I feel like we haven't necessarily seen the last of Mark, although it would be very nice. But I was just happy to see how it worked out today.
Eden tells Sophia that Kirk's last words to her were, "I'll see you around." She says, "He's pleading guilty, so I think he's going to get a reduced sentence." Sophia says it must be difficult to be around Cruz now. So yes, unlike when Marcello got sent off and no one spoke about him again, Kirk is still fresh on everyone's mind and the fear that he might show up again at a moment's notice. Santana offers Keith Timmons sangria, and he says, "Oh, it's probably not a good choice for a newly minted DA, so he opts for a cold soda instead." So we've seen Keith Timmons drinking water, and now we've seen him drinking a cold soda.
That's making me think perhaps he has a drinking problem in his past.
That would be a spoiler if I told you.
But that's often what it indicates on these shows. We'll see.
They talk about what a great job Julia did with the jury selection. Eden pops by to return Cruz's jacket that he lent her, and Santana says, "He's a regular Sir Galahad." Now, Santana's really snarky throughout this episode. It's actually, she had some great lines. And Eden meets Keith, and Keith reminisces about a girl from high school that he tried to date who is in charge of the reunion that's coming up, and asks if Santana and Cruz are going. They said they just got their invitations last week. And then I kind of didn't quite get. Eden was talking about being a couple of years ahead of someone at Lyman Prep, so I'm wondering if Eden knew the same person too, but from a different school. So.
There is Misha.
But Santana seems to kind of rush Eden out the door, even though they did have a little chat, which Cruz is annoyed about. Now, Cruz seems annoyed throughout this whole actual thing. I get a sense that he didn't really like Keith Timmons that much. Santana seems to be the one who was friends with Keith and not Cruz.
Yeah.
And probably annoyed that he's hanging around, mainly because he likes Santana, right? So later, Cruz tells to Santana that he'd like it if their guests felt welcome. And Santana says, "I would too." Keith is still there, and he says they should invite him to a barbecue sometime. When he leaves, Santana says, "I thought he'd never leave." Cruz says, "I think he still likes you." "Are you jealous?" says Santana, and Cruz says, "Of course I am." They end up kind of in a bit of a snarky mood with each other and decide to just go out to, get in a better mood. So they go to the Orient Express for dinner, and Santana feels that Cruz is watching Eden out of the corner of his eye during that. And she suddenly says, "Do whatever you want with Eden. It's not going to be me that stops you." Keith comes over and says that he's been watching long enough now and waiting for Cruz to ask Santana to dance, so he's going to do it himself. And so he takes Santana out to the dance floor, which we do not see in this episode, but this was right toward the end for them, so we may actually see it in the next episode where they clear the dance floor section. We don't see them again in the episode because we focus on Cruz, who notes that Eden has left and follows her to the Capwell house. Now she sees his car and then goes inside and waits behind the door for him to knock. And he comes up there and almost knocks, but changes his mind and drives away. So Eden is disappointed. So I don't know. He's kind of been given a go-ahead from Santana. Seems like she's done with things.
Yeah, it was interesting to me because I think when we've talked about this several times, how Cruz and Santana's marriage was going to finally end because, it seemed obvious it would at some point, since Cruz and Eden seemed to be destined for each other. But I had imagined all sorts of dramatic things happening, and it seems like they're just irritated with each other. And I feel like with Kirk out of the picture, Santana doesn't have that kind of extra layer between Cruz and Eden. And it seems like maybe she's seen possibilities for herself with Keith, and has made the decision that she's not going to dig in and fight for the relationship with Cruz. She's going to go her own way.
Speaking about relationship potentials, we never talked about Alice. But presumably she'll meet Ted when he comes to visit Kelly, and presumably Ted and Haley will break up at some point when he finds out Gina's his aunt. So that's a potential for Alice. There's Justin, who's the only guy on the show who's locked into the same institution as her. Cece's single. Who else? That's about it. Pearl, maybe, if things go wrong with Courtney. See how the trial could go horribly wrong from Courtney's point of view. So anyway, we've got to keep that on the horizon for Alice if she ever makes it out of the state hospital. And speaking of Ted, he is rehearsing his audition in front of Haley. He has applied for a job as a DJ at the campus radio station. KUSB, I believe, is the correct call letters, but I will definitely correct next time we hear. University of Santa Barbara, is that a real one? I assume they have a fake university name for them to go to. Although they were talking about Stanford, which was a real place. So, but it's definitely not at University of California at Santa Barbara. At the audition, he meets Jane Wilson, who already works there, but has applied for the on-air job as well. And she has a negative attitude right from the get-go. These three men being brought in to audition for this thing. She's sure she won't get the job because the station already has a token woman on the air. And there's a station manager that she points out as bald who will be making the decision. Well, the other two guys, other than we see them rehearsing in the background, never even get any lines and get sent away by the station manager. And then he comes over and says, "Congratulations, Capwell," or "Welcome aboard, Capwell." So Ted will be a DJ for the Santa Barbara Summertime Teen Scene Fun Time. And he'll get to work with Jane, who must be pretty happy that he got her job. But another potential love interest for Ted if things go awry with Haley.
Yeah.
So now we've got someone who's using up Amy's paycheck, and I guess Alice is using up maybe Dylan's paycheck, and Keith is using up Kirk's paycheck. And Sam actually still was a paid regular before he left, so I don't think they've replaced him. So I think there's still room in the budget for one more permanent person to join the cast. So we'll see. But we have 3 new cast members in 3 days. So ready for the next 3-month segment of storylines.
And we should mention that we actually very recently just heard a very interesting interview with Louise Sorel, which didn't shed light so much on this period of Santa Barbara, but she talked a lot about her relationship with Dame Judith Anderson and with Nick Coster, and some of the stories they worked on early on in the series.
She was interviewed by, I can't think of his first name now, Locker is the man's last name, and he, since the beginning of the pandemic, he just started interviewing soap people every week or so. And so if you search for The Locker Room on YouTube, you'll find that interview was just done last Wednesday, I believe. Pardon me. So yeah, that was a fun thing. I was hoping there weren't any spoilers in there because I didn't preview it before I played it. And she said, "Oh, there are two times on the show I really enjoyed," and then she talks about the time with Ronnie Shell and Frank Armstead, the fake astronaut. But then they never got to the second one, so that may have been a spoilery one, but she never got around to it. So yeah, you didn't hear any spoilers.
No.
Ted gets the job, and Haley promises him a surprise. And she also tells him she quit her job, and he's very happy about that because he'd been pushing for that for a while.
And this will get Cece off their case.
Now I'm wondering if this will, she'll need a place to live, right? So presumably, maybe they'll get a place together.
Well, isn't Kelly's old apartment still knocking around?
And where's Gina living? In the gazebo? Last time we saw her, she showed up at the house because she had nowhere to go, and then she went towards the kitchen. So she's hiding in the scullery. Scullery, is that a thing? Or she's hiding in the tunnels. We don't know where she is.
But it seems to me there's at least 2 apartments in Kelly's building. The one
Sally's
apartment, and the one apparently a few floors away that Kelly was more recently living in. So
she could maybe sublet it to Haley. Not that she's in any condition to be subletting. And actually, right now, Justin's apartment is free as well.
That was free too. Yeah.
And really, you could kind of split Pearl's into 2 if you really wanted to. I mean, is there another door, another way to exit Pearl's apartment, Pearl's real apartment? You think from a fire exit standpoint, there should be. So that's something we may find out someday. Anyway, it'll be fun to see. Ted's summer job. I remember one thing only about the radio station, hijinks. So it'll be mostly new to me. And Jane Wilson, I think we'll see another Wilson at some point too. The name sounds familiar. So we'll be seeing some Jacksons and Wilsons at some point. Well, my TV seems to think we should end it. So that's it for Tuesday. We'll see you after we watch episode 472 of Santa Barbara.
Bye-bye.
I just came to bring Cruz's jacket back. Thanks.
Yeah.
He lent it to me at the courthouse.
Oh, that's Cruz, all right. He's a regular Sir Galahad.
Welcome back.
Hello.
We've watched the 472nd episode of Santa Barbara, which originally aired Wednesday, June 4th, 1986. Kelly pretends to take her pills, but hides them as Justin had suggested. Alice becomes violent, which apparently she has done before and had a weapon at that time, so her room is searched. I think it's pretty obvious now Kelly and Alice are sharing a room. Well, guess what? They find Kelly's pills, and so Dr. Renfrew gives her an injection. The nurse spots Justin lurking around, but Dr. Rawlings reveals he has known the whole time that Justin is hanging out at the hospital and has pretended to be a patient, and he's got a plan in mind for Mr. Moore, Dr. Moore.
And I don't think this sounds like very good news for Justin.
No, these Dr. R's. Justin finds Kelly drugged again and tells her he'll get her out somehow, but Dr. Rollins is listening. So he might just let Justin hang himself with a breakout attempt. Haley tells Gina she quit her job. And she says she wants Gina out of her life, not because she hates her, but because she's afraid of her. They have quite a long talk about it as Gina tries desperately to hang on to Haley, but Haley is not having it. And then Ted comes by and spots Gina, and Gina says, "Oh, I just came by to see how Kelly is." And Ted says, "Well, that's not really any of your business anymore." Gina goes to see Kelly and realizes how out of it Kelly is and tells her, "Well, if you ever stand trial for murder, I will show the DA the gun and the videotape. But obviously this wouldn't be a good time because you are too adult to stand trial. But hopefully you'll get better soon because the sooner your trial starts, the sooner I can get my son and my home back in exchange for this evidence."
So this made me wonder, obviously, as long as Kelly is under the control of Dr. Rawlings, she's not going to stand trial. So it seems like that part of the plot line with Gina and the gun probably would be sort of frozen for now. So I feel like this indicates maybe at some point Justin will be successful, or something will happen to loosen Dr. Rawlings' control over Kelly. So she can proceed to trial and we can see what Gina's got planned.
But I also wonder what Gina's storyline is going to be until then. I mean, I imagine she'll be trying to get back in Haley's good graces. And that may end up backfiring for Haley in the sense that it might lead to Ted finding out. He might overhear something, considering how often Haley and Gina are chatting in the atrium.
Yeah.
Mason makes his opening statements in the David Laurent trial, mentioning that Madeline's estate is worth tens of millions. Julia makes her opening statements, claiming that everything Mason's saying can't really be backed up by the evidence. Then they also come and put their first witness on the stand, which is Cruz. And he reveals to the jury all of the things that David hid until the evidence forced him to admit to them, such as pretending to be back east during the murder, pretending he hadn't seen Madeline, pretending he didn't know about the divorce, pretending he didn't smoke, pretending he didn't have another shirt. David says he did all that because he was afraid the murder would be pinned on him. And then when it comes Julia's turn to question Cruz, she says, well, didn't you wrongfully arrest Pearl for the murder? So I think she's making that link that David was right to be afraid that they would wrongfully arrest him based on just the circumstantial evidence.
Now, it occurs to me that, she continues with that line of questioning. It will be maybe a little bit harder to make the case around Lionel Lockridge, just because she's going with David's argument that the Capwells are out to get him, that the Capwells are setting him up. Well, the Capwells really wouldn't have any reason to protect Lionel.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
So that's just, one thought I had about where that might fall down logistically.
Just maybe throwing too many things out that contradict each other. Courtney is afraid of what David might do to her if he's found innocent, she says to Pearl. Courtney receives a mysterious call giving her Sheila Carlisle's address. Sheila tells Courtney that she and David did not have a romantic relationship, but when she conveniently leaves the room, Courtney finds a note, which is a love note to David from Sheila, talking all about their relationship. And when Courtney leaves, Sheila smiles that Courtney has taken the bait. So I'm wondering if we have a new suspect for Madeline's murder, that maybe Sheila did it and she's trying to pin it on David.
I thought that was a possibility. I also thought it was a possibility that she planted the note for Courtney to find. Courtney will bring it to the DA's office and they'll grandly present it as evidence, and then Sheila will come in and say, oh no, that's fake or whatever. And somehow that will lead to blowing up the credibility around their prosecution of David. That was the other
So this
thought
may be Sheila and David's plan.
Yeah, that was a thought. I mean, it's sort of hard to tell at this point if Sheila is aligned with David, trying to get him off, or if she's actually an enemy of David, or if she's just completely playing her own game. That we will have to see how that unfolds.
Well, Courtney actually leaves the note there, but tells Mason, oh, I saw a note. So I don't know if she thought ahead that, oh, we should probably get a warrant to get that note, to seize that note, and didn't want to taint the evidence. So that'd be interesting. Be the first time in history that a character has failed to taint evidence.
Yeah, including all these police stories we watch from the 70s where Barnaby Jones is basically just picking everything up and pocketing it.
He's constantly wandering into crime scenes and moving stuff around. Jane makes fun of Ted for writing out his own introduction. Are you afraid you'll forget your own name? She says. He says that her audition was better than his, and she won't rest until the station has as many women as men. Ted says his friend Haley has applied for the secretarial job, And Jane wonders if Haley is Ted's girlfriend. Ted says, no, just a friend. She says that women are conditioned to become slaves, so they have to be protected against themselves. She scoffs at Haley's lack of secretarial skills and then laughs when she discovers that she is Ted's maid. Haley gets the job, and Jane says, this is a red-letter day for you, Mr. Capwell. You've got my job, and now you've got your own personal maid. The station manager tells Haley that Jane would show her how to make coffee, etc. Jane tells Haley, I don't do coffee, give back rubs, or sew on buttons. You look like the type who would. I wanted a man for this job. My friends are liberated. That's one of the many things Ted Capwell and I don't have in common.
I actually feel like we're seeing the beginning of a possible love triangle between these three, because for all the sort of ideological stances, I think the key question in that was her asking Ted if Haley was his girlfriend.
Oh, well, I thought that was just because she suspected that he was trying to get his girlfriend a job there.
Well, it could be that too. But.
Yes, I remember, I think we'll see it more in coming episodes, Jane being portrayed as a radical feminist, and I also didn't think of it at the time, but as I was writing up the summary, she's also being portrayed as a shrew, which means that potentially a taming of the shrew type storyline with her and Ted. They've also given her that raspy voice, which is quite shrewish, which she did use to good effect later on Friends. It's kind of interesting that in 1986 they were depicting Jane's workplace theories as radical feminism, but in 2022 a lot of these things would be actually quite standard and taken for granted, that you would want an equal number of men and women for jobs and not hire people for specific roles based on their gender. So it's actually kind of funny because they were probably actively portraying this as shrewish behavior. Also, I think even down to putting those glasses on her and the way they're doing her hair and having her dress, so which is probably the wardrobe person's, idea. But
I think it's interesting too because on Dynasty, probably around this time or maybe even a year or two before, we had the character of Fallon giving very similar speeches in some ways, but doing it in a very slinky outfit and, from the point of view of someone who is actually the daughter of the boss. So.
So I remember liking the character of Jane, but I don't remember much. I only remember about two things about her upcoming storylines. Looking on, she seems to hang around for a while, so she probably has further storylines in coming years. But I really, I only remember two small things about the summertime things, and one might not actually even be introduced until much later. So, well, maybe actually it's one larger thing, but we will see. We've now got several. We've got Ted, Haley, and Jane for the summertime storyline, and if Alice can get out of the institution, she might be around the age range to be friends with that group as well. So I'm looking forward to seeing more Ted stuff and to see how that develops and how long they manage to keep Gina's relationship to Haley a secret from Ted.
Yeah, I think if they can develop this character out to be a little more three-dimensional and not just sort of the shrew, could be a very interesting kind of dynamic she develops with Ted.
Yeah, I think they will sort of soften that aspect of her character at some point. And plus, I really like the radio station angle for Ted. You don't see it that often, actually, in fiction, which is interesting. And based on my hat, as a radio station fan as a kid. Looking forward to more of this. And we'll see how the trial progresses. It seems like last June we had a trial, which was Ted's rape trial. So it looks like every June we're going to have a nice trial on Santa Barbara. At least that's how things are going so far. We'll be back after we watch episode 473 of Santa Barbara. See you then.
Bye-bye.
Welcome back.
Hello.
We have finished episode 473 of Santa Barbara, which originally aired Thursday, June 5th, 1986. Cece listens to Ted's first radio broadcast and tells him he's a natural. Ted seems shocked at the unexpected praise from Cece.
And this is actually a really nice scene because not only is Cece listening, but Eden's listening too. And it's just this really beautiful, warm family moment where they're obviously very proud of Ted.
Haley moves out of the Capwell mansion. She doesn't really have a place to go, so Ted convinces her to spend the night in his room, and they sleep head to toe. So I guess they haven't slept together yet. It hadn't occurred to me that hadn't happened. Inspired by one of those movies we saw. Eden tells Cece about her meeting with Sophia, and this was filmed at a very weird angle. They were at the far back of the atrium, but in the background were the doors to the dining room. So the camera was like way back past where the fountain is. They must have removed the fountain. And it occurs to me why that might have happened, which I'll get to a little bit later. Sophia tells Eden about the time that Reuben helped her plant daisies, and they got ruined by a storm. So Cece filled the atrium with daisies. And Sophia thinks Ted was probably conceived that night. So from a history of Santa Barbara perspective, that shows that Reuben was working for the Capwells way back then. Eden fills the atrium with daisies, hoping that something will get rekindled in Cece and Sophia's minds. It prompts Cece to try to plan a future with Sophia, but she says since her cancer, she's only living in the present. And she walks out. I'm wondering if the reason for that weird camera angle was because they had all those daisies on the set. And in order not to get them in the shot in earlier scenes, they had to shove the camera into that far back corner.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, they probably have a very finite amount of time to film these things. So once certain set pieces are in place, they just kind of need to work around the situation, I would think.
That's my guess. Anyway, it was nice to see a unique angle on the atrium. Once in a while, we get something new. Cruz tells Santana they'll have to put off their night out. And Keith overhears and invites Santana to dinner. And they end up getting locked in the courtroom for a while. Santana seems both excited and scared to be locked into the courtroom with Keith. I kind of like Keith.
Yeah, I like Keith too.
I think that'll be good. I mean, if Cruz is going to dump her, I think that'd be a nice pairing, Santana and Keith.
Yeah, things definitely don't seem to be smooth sailing for Cruz and Santana right now. So, yeah, this could shake things up. It could be interesting. I did sort of wonder where Brandon was, but...
Yeah. And where's Gina? She's hiding somewhere in the mansion,
Gina?
Probably hiding in that servant's stairwell, because she has no money. She can't really stay anywhere. Mason gets a court order to search Sheila's apartment. Cruz finds the note fairly quickly, hidden in a hat box that's right out there on the table, as well as I think it's in a date book or something. So I don't know if that date book was also confiscated. But Cruz and Mason discuss almost immediately that was way too easy. So this is actually, a little different from how things go on other soap operas. I mean, they immediately suspected it was a setup. So,
and indeed it was, because we see Sheila, as soon as she finds out they're coming, quickly making this thing as obvious as possible in a hat box.
Mason goes back to tell Sheila he's going to question her on the stand tomorrow. And she says, well, you're not going to get anything out of me. That note is no proof of an affair. It's just a note. And so I'm going to testify that David, was not a philanderer. But I wonder if she will testify the exact opposite.
It's going to be really interesting to see how this plays out. And why does she want this evidence found? Why does she want to go on the stand? What will she say? I
mean, it'll really point the finger at her if it's obvious that she's lying to anyone. So, although they talked about her being a woman scorned when Mason and Cruz were talking, they weren't really suspecting that she was the killer. So, but she's our best suspect right now.
Next to David Laurent.
Oh, yeah. Mason looks for Julia and calls around, calls Augusta, whom we don't see. And she eventually answers the phone at David's hotel room. Just to make sure that they are sleeping together, Mason bribes a hotel staff member to bring them room service that they didn't order, and then gets him to confirm that Julia's hastily thrown on a robe to answer the door. I don't think that's something he could use in court, but it's certainly something he could needle her about.
Yeah, I was kind of wondering what the implications of that could be. Because I have heard of court cases where a lawyer does become involved with a defendant, and that does make for a conflict of interest. I seem to remember reading one somewhere. I mean, I don't think it's quite as uncommon as you might think, so I don't know. I don't know what the legal ramifications of that would be.
Well, they always seem to surprise us on Santa Barbara. So. I'm not sure if this is the best point to mention it, but that room next to the courtroom where they sometimes meet, the first time we saw it, it had a picture of President Reagan. And I didn't mention it, but I thought, oh, it's a state courthouse, I think. No, it's the city courthouse, but the state hospital is next to it. But there's a picture of Reagan, who's federal. Anyway, it now is filled with every other president. So I have no idea what happened. I saw Woodrow Wilson. Anyway, they're all up there now. I didn't see Reagan actually in the pan across, but maybe they realized it was a mistake to have the president in the city or state courtroom, and so to cover for it, they just threw in everything else as sort of a general theme for that room. Mason and Mary meet at the Orient Express for dinner, but they both decide they'd rather sleep together, and they do. With only a brief hitch when she briefly has a flashback of Mark, which I, of course, thought was going to derail the whole thing, but next time we saw them, they were waking up together. So, and she thanked Mason for helping her get over that. So that's nice that she's not having this long-term trauma about that.
Yeah, that's kind of nice.
Different from what we often see in fiction. So.
That's right, and it makes me wonder if they're just kind of ready to maybe put more energy into one of the other storylines. Because they've actually got a lot of storylines that they're juggling right now. So.
Eden tells Cruz she knows he followed her home the other day. By the way, Cruz still has a black eye and his arm in a sling. And last time we saw Kirk, his eye had actually gotten worse. It was like the whole thing was red, whereas the first day it was just kind of bleeding from the side. So presumably Kirk is in a bit of pain in prison as well. They'd have a conversation, and it doesn't seem to be going well for Eden. Cruz is not planning to leave Santana, and he actually says someday she'll find someone who's worthy of her. So Eden, I guess, kind of gives up and finds Santana at the Orient Express and tells her she's not going to take up any more of Cruz's time. And Santana says, well, you can't take a man's heart when it already belongs to you. And then Cruz arrives just in time, and Keith gives him a little grin, which I thought was kind of cheeky. Cruz is a little put out by this and says, what's going on? And Santana says, he was just being a gentleman. And Cruz says, oh, I mean what's going on with you and Eden. Looked like you were arguing. Santana says, it looked like that? Ask Eden. And she storms out. So I feel like, if she can just get CC to sign over Brandon, she could just forget about Cruz and focus on Keith. Yeah,
that seems to be where things are going. Now, of course, we know that there's a whole possible situation with Gina brewing because she has this evidence that could be used to defend Kelly. So I feel like there's a lot of things Gina could ask for in that situation, and one of them could certainly be Brandon. So, I think Santana might find herself in a situation where she throws off Cruz, and then Gina sweeps in and gets Brandon.
It's kind of weird to think that we've only seen Gina and Brandon in one scene together since he learned she came back to life. So you would think they would be together every second of the day in reality, or he'd want to be anyway. But yeah, I I think a lot seems to be stacked against Santana on the Gina side. But Keith is the district attorney. I think she would be wise to try and get him behind her because he might be able to even outrank Cece on the legal front if if we're talking about court orders and binding documents and things. That is it for a Thursday show. We will be back. I might as well talk about this. I found this little Expo souvenir. Oops, where's the camera? It seems to be a beer mug. It's Expo 86. I don't know if this would have been from the German pavilion or just a random gift shop at Expo. It says made in Taiwan, so that doesn't help. But anyway, there's another Expo 86 souvenir. If I find any more, I'll bring them up in future episodes. Anyway, we'll be back after we watch episode 474 of Santa Barbara. See you then.
Bye-bye.
I'm going to come see you in court today. It's been a long time since I've seen the famous Mason Capwell in action, and after all, the last time I didn't really get a chance to appreciate you.
Welcome back.
Hello.
We finished episode 474 of Santa Barbara, which originally aired Friday, June 6th, 1986. And in this few days since we've watched the last episode, we've seen a lot of Santa Barbara alumni on various shows. I had just been commenting to Diane, we haven't seen a C.C. Capwell for a while. And suddenly we get Peter Mark Richmond on Mission Impossible. And then the next day we got Lloyd Bochner on Hawaii Five-0. So that was a bit of a surprise. And future Santa Barbara cast member Chuck McCann was on a St. Elsewhere that we watched. And then just before we recorded, I was watching Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea, and Alejandro Rey was on, who played Dr. Ramirez, the man who helped Cece steal Santana's baby. And in the same episode was Henry Delgado, who will be credited on IMDb for the last time as Henry Delgado, after which he went by Henry Darrow, and he will be playing Cruz's father someday. So, quite a lot of after-hours Santa Barbara stuff. Back to 1986, Mary wakes up to find Mason getting dressed for court. She says she'll come by later to watch. The last time I didn't get a chance to appreciate it, she says. Which is a bit of an understatement.
Yes.
Since, for those of you who may be just randomly tuning into this episode, the last time Mason was cross-examining her sister, who was claiming that his brother had raped her. So, Mary's family was not necessarily on Mason's side in any way back then. Julia also wakes up for court, and David pulls her back into bed, and she kind of, although she says she's going to be at court in an hour, she lets him pull her in. So she then has to phone Augusta to tell her that she can't pick her up after all. Just meet me at the courthouse. Augusta's at, guess what? The Orient Express. That's probably where she has breakfast every day now. David realizes from that, overhearing half that conversation, that Lionel is the surprise witness that Julia is going to try to pin the murder on. So this is the first time David finds that out. And at the courthouse, Julia and David both discover that Sheila will be testifying. Lionel watches the trial on TV at the Orient Express, and Augusta asks him if he was having an affair with Madeline. She's privy to this diary information that Julia has. She doesn't really believe his denials. He says it was all business. He was secretly helping Cece's brother, Grant Capwell, to get control of Cece's fortune.
Which is what we had kind of figured.
Yeah, this is actually kind of fun. So that whole time we saw Lionel basically, what we thought was the worst time of his life, he was actually involved in this. And maybe that one episode where we saw him sneak back into the mansion and get those documents out of the secret room, maybe that was all related to that. We just didn't know it at the time.
Yeah.
In the courtroom, later, Julia hands Lionel a subpoena. But we won't get to see that in this episode. At the Capwell atrium, Pearl sets up a TV so he can watch the trial. And Courtney reveals to him that she's going to testify about something secret. P.I. Whitmore is the first person to be called, and he testifies that he told Madeline he was certain there was something going on between David and Sheila Carlisle. Julia counters that Whitmore spent 3 years in prison for tax evasion and extortion. Then Courtney testifies that she saw Sheila Carlisle in a ski lodge several years ago when she, David, and Madeline were on a ski trip. And at the time, she didn't put it together, but now she's certain they were having an affair. And Julia gets her to admit that her parents didn't like David and that Courtney is only guessing about the affair. So Julia seems to be doing a good job of overturning everything Mason presents until Courtney tells the court about the letter she found in Sheila Carlisle's apartment. And Mason has Sheila read it out loud to the court, which causes David to jump up and shout, this is all true, all untrue, But guess what? Julia tells David she's quitting as his lawyer. So she was very quickly swayed by some random sheet of paper that a third party wrote.
Yeah, it's interesting that this is what has decided, has given her the idea to renounce David. Not potentially getting Pearl into trouble, not potentially getting Lionel into trouble, not the rift that's going to happen with Augusta, nor any of David's countless lies.
Now, as we mentioned last time, this is the one piece of evidence that both Cruz and Mason think is probably fake.
Yeah, that's the other irony of this.
So, Mason was going to put it up there, and presumably Julia would question it, and, he did his best to introduce it. But perhaps Mason thought, even if it is fake, maybe we'll get some truth out of having it brought up. So I think Mason is as shocked as anyone at the effect it's had. Cece phones Lionel and tells him to come to the mansion. Cece never goes to visit people. And to talk about Sophia, but Sophia interrupts them, and so they pretend they were talking about something else. Cece says, I was just telling Lionel I was going to subdivide his old property and sell it off in chunks. And Lionel says, I was just telling Cece if he does that, I'll burn the whole thing down. And just... our set is still full of daisies. Sophia suggests sending them all to the children's wing in the hospital. So I assume next Monday we will not have any daisies on the atrium set. Mm-hmm. Justin calls Cece, and while he's on the phone with Cece, Dr. Rawlings unplugs the phone, revealing he's known Justin's been there the whole time. And then, as a joke, he calls an orderly to take Justin for electroshock therapy. And the fact is, I thought he was really going to do it until he told the orderly, no, I'm just kidding, kick him out.
I was relieved. I thought he would maybe even get sent for a lobotomy or something.
I know, you're expecting him to be an evil doctor. And so it's, yeah. So, well, maybe he's not as evil as we feared. A soap opera psychiatrist. Cece, Sophia, and Pearl arrive, and Cece says, I got cut off with Justin, and... Rawlings says, I kicked him out, so I don't know where he is, but he's not here. But he also reveals that Kelly's visitation privileges have been revoked and no one can see her. And he says, it's part of her healing, and when she's all well, she can stand trial. So Cece's not entirely happy about the standing trial part. But Pearl, having previously reacted to hearing Dr. Rawlings' name spoken by Sophia and Cece back at the mansion, is hiding behind a pillar and confirms to himself, this is the Dr. Rawlings that I know. Back at the Capwell house, Justin visits, and Cece accuses him of harming Kelly with his treatment, mimicking what Dr. Rawlings keeps saying. But Justin says it's Rawlings, so Cece actually does a bit of diligence. He checks with the Boston clinic, where Rawlings worked for 8 years, and now we have a link between Pearl and Rawlings, being both from Boston. And he makes the decision that Kelly is safe with Rawlings. Pearl pulls Justin aside.
Cece being the excellent judge of character.
Exactly.
Seen in the past.
Peter Flint. With Justin's help, he says he can break into the sanitarium to check on Kelly. And Justin's like, what? Why are you suddenly trying to get involved in this? And he says, I know this Dr. Rawlings from way back. And I got a lot of unfinished business with him. He treated someone I knew. So right away I thought of the brother that he mentioned to Sheila recently, or that Sheila mentioned to him. She says, I haven't seen you since that business with your brother. So I'm wondering if Pearl's brother may have been under Rawlings' care and something went dreadfully wrong, and Pearl, blamed the doctor, but maybe his family was on the doctor's side, just like Cece is. So anyway, be interesting to see if that is related to the brother we've heard about, or if it's something else, or maybe Pearl was under Rawlings' care himself, and that's why he's hiding in the shadows.
Yeah, it was. I had not actually remembered the reference to the brother, so I was really glad you reminded me of that. But I'm wondering if this may have a role in Pearl's complete estrangement from his own family.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I think
How he was treated, or his brother, or something about this episode has led him to lead this whole second life. So I'm actually kind of relieved that it's Pearl who's going to be maybe doing a bit of the detective work in the hospital, because I feel like he's a little more equipped for this than Justin, who's a bit idealistic.
They've kind of swapped Pearl out for Justin in our theorized One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest storyline. So, as I had said before, I only remember a couple things about this summer, but I remember Pearl and Kelly having a storyline together. So this is the start of that. And I don't know how long it will last, but I think we're going to have a whole summer in the institution, and maybe Pearl gets stuck there if Justin, being the only one who knows he's in there, maybe gets, injured or something and can't remember that Pearl's there or something like that.
Yeah, and then we could have an interesting situation of Courtney perhaps looking for Pearl and trying to free him, and that could bring in a whole other aspect.
Depending how evil Dr. Rawlings is, she might get kidnapped and locked in a thing too.
Yeah. We get multiple kidnappings sometimes when Kelly Capwell is involved.
I think the August sweeps will see the acceleration of that story. But then, of course, it might be modified by Robin Wright's break, so it may be suddenly on hold for a couple months and then returned. So next week we have the trial to look forward to. We've had several witnesses already. It's going at a good speed, I think. But maybe with Julia quitting, there'll be suddenly, a week's adjournment. And of course, the reunion, they said, was in a week or two. So maybe we'll see that next week, or maybe the week after. So looking forward to seeing maybe other people who went to school with Cruz and Santana and Keith. And I guess the Perkinses would have gone to that high school if their mom didn't work at that cushy Lyman Prep with all the great ex-con teachers.
And they're all dead and off the show now anyway. So
I know. We've got... Who do we have left? I mean, theoretically, Marissa lives in the house, and Amy lives in the house with Minx and Brick, but we haven't even seen Brick for a while. So, and that is it for this week 97. We'll be back with the Monday, June 9th episode after we watch episode 475 of Santa Barbara. We'll see that.
Bye-bye.
Your sign on?
Yeah.
I can't believe you're writing it out. Are you afraid to forget your own name?